Well, when I first started collecting counters, it was a practices research project, and it was about really, for me, I just had a baby. I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I wanted to know if theatre was worth it, or if there were other things I should be doing in my world that were more useful, more useful, I suppose. Um, so the project was about looking at, can the theatre actually affect change? Does it have a real value nowadays? And the university, I was based at Hope at the time, we'd just moved down to the Everton campus. And at that time, there was absolutely no arts provision in North Liverpool at all. There'd been nothing. There was just a dearth. And it was an area that was just absolutely decimated, really. 50% of the population had gone over the previous 50 years because there were no jobs. Most of the streets were half tinned up, but still lived in a few houses. It was just derelict, and the millions had been put in for regeneration, but it had absolutely no effect, and people felt they were being done to. There was a very strong sense of disempowerment. They were arriving at meetings and being told, well, that street's going to get knocked down and you'll be moving over here, and there was no engagement at all. So I went round and I met, 30 or so community leaders and asked them, do you think there's any point in theatre? What could it do? And very clearly they said it could give a mouthpiece, it could give a voice to the stories of people here who are not being heard, and it could provide useful activities for people who have nothing else to do. So coming out of that, we developed Living Place Project, which ran a youth programme, a third age programme. Each of those created their own pieces, which were performed in fact. And we did a big documentary theatre piece, a professional piece, which did involve some community performance and student performance as well, that animated a derelict street. So that kind of was what started us off in North Liverpool. It was right in the shadow of the Anfield Stadium. So then we continued working solely in North Liverpool and solely with community groups there up until about 2008, at which point, because the capital of culture, there was suddenly a bit more money, and so other arts organisations started to work in the north of the city, which was fantastic to see, but it meant that we didn't have our kind of specific, we're the only people doing this thing anymore. So large organisations, Everyman Playhouse, Biennial Fact, started to work out there as well, and we kind of had to look at what's our focus now. Is there a point in us keeping on in this area now that there is a greater provision? And we decided that we felt very committed to North Liverpool. We wanted to maintain our base there and our roots there, and have continued to work with community groups there ever since, but we also started to look a little bit further afield at other marginalised groups in the city that weren't being worked with. So that was when we started to work with the homeless community, because there was nobody else doing that kind of work. And then slowly we kind of got other bits of commissions, or other work came up slightly outside. So we did a bit of work on the Wirral, in St Helens, in Sefton, and started to expand our reach, but keeping the focus on working with people who didn't have other opportunities to engage in the arts. So it did become a wider remit than North Liverpool. I think what I felt at that time was that we had to either choose to work very directly in one very small community, so we will be Anfield's theatre company, or go wider and work with a range of marginalised groups, and that was the option that we chose in the end.
Yeah. And so tell me more, what was that, because you felt the presence of other cultural organisations in those sites now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was. We didn't want to be competing or replicating provision. Yeah. We didn't want. It was at the same time kind of frustrating. Like, fucking hell, now there's a bit of money, everybody's coming out here. Yeah. But at the same time, great. This place has been so under-supported and under-serviced for so long. Now there's a stack of arts activity. We should kind of step out. The point of us is to work with people who other people are not reaching. Yeah. So the people that we do still work with in North Liverpool do tend to be those kind of harder to reach groups, excluded kids, homeless people, people that other people don't really want to touch or don't know quite how to access. And we would have a strong history now of working with voluntary sector, community sector, third sector providers to get into those more difficult to reach communities. So we decided to kind of focus in on that.
Okay.
The frame right from the very beginning has been about poverty and inequality. So we've worked and continue to work with a whole range of different groups. Our core groups are disadvantaged young people, older people, people with dementia and their carers, the homeless community, mental health service users. They would be the kind of main core groups that we work with. So with each of those groups, they explore the things that matter to them, the issues that are impacting on their lives, but all of that is within a frame of poverty and inequality. So in the past, and we've had this kind of shift as well over the last few years that you'd be aware of, Jenny, trying to move from a kind of personal to a political agenda and from a more kind of liberal approach to change to a more radical approach to change. So it's been a process with the participant groups, moving from looking at those individual and kind of personal issues, finding a commonality and sense of shared circumstance, and then moving beyond that and looking at the wider political arena and how they fit within that. So the group we work with in St Helens is quite a good example, actually. They're a group of mental health service users, and they started off very much wanting to tell their stories. The next piece they did then was looking at, was mental health a personal issue, or was it a product of the society that we're living in? So they've kind of clearly made that shift. And the last piece they did was a piece that I wrote coming out of their workshop process, their devising practices. They gave me all the material and I scripted it then, and it was a piece that was looking at trying to encourage people to engage in the democratic process. So it was moving right away from their personal issues and looking at wider political and change, and looking at the impact of poverty and inequality on people, on communities, and how they might start to lobby for radical change coming out of their own personal experiences. So that's the kind of pattern of work, I suppose, the pattern that we've been through, starting with people as individuals in the place that they're at, and then trying to look over a period of time at the bigger picture, and how it all ties into that issue around poverty and inequality. With each show that we do, people will come away with a kind of 10-point plan about what can you do, a little flyer, what can you do to make a difference. We're tying into other broader political campaigns now, so whether it be around homelessness or whatever. So we're trying to make the connection between the work that participant groups are making and wider social and political action through online, through the social media that we're using, and through the ways that we're framing the political work. So we're trying to bring people from campaigning organisations to the work, and then us connect it back to them as well. For years and years, the processes that we've used has been a pure devising process. So the lead facilitator goes into a room with a group, works with them to develop their theatre skills, to use drama to explore ideas, to determine what they want to talk about, and then create a piece of theatre coming out of it. And what we're trialling at the moment, we want to try and enhance the quality of the participatory theatre that we're producing, and to kind of heighten the theatricality of it, to explore different performance mechanisms that might be more relevant or more direct, or just more a bit more exciting than emerges during that workshop creation process. So we're trialling a model. This is the third time now we've done it, where the group does a lot of devising work. I would be party to that and see the work, have all the material, the scenes that come out of it, and then take that and try and craft it into a piece that's actually written, and the script then goes back to the group. So that there's a very strong sense of ownership. They recognise their words, their ideas, their imagery in it, but I suppose the theory is, and I think it's working, that the theatricality of it is enhanced because it's written by somebody who has that background and that expertise. So it's been working really well. There's been a very strong sense of ownership by the groups. They've really liked working with scripts after a long time of devising. So it's a new model. So at the moment I'm writing a piece called Wealth is Health, which is a short cabaret looking at health inequality. So it's looking at both the kind of social health determinants that has been wider than individual action, and also the decimation of the NHS, and trying to bring those things together. And that's going to be performed by our Third Age theatre company. So its purpose is twofold, really. One is about enhancing the quality of the participatory theatre, and the other is about somebody having the space to kind of sit back and frame the stuff that they're talking about within that wider political context, and do the research, and to have the kind of stats and the data and the broader kind of political knowledge to bring to the work that they're generating. Yes, absolutely. We'd done an opera a few years ago which was looking at homelessness, and out of that we recognised that a quarter of the homeless community in Liverpool were veterans. So we started to try and do more targeted work with homeless veterans, and so we ended up partnering with Imperial War Museum. We did a 12-month project with them where we worked with veterans from some were national service, a couple were Second World War, mostly quite a lot Northern Ireland ex-soldiers, and then some Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. So we worked with them weekly, and they generated material and ideas. Then I wrote a script that was a site-specific piece that happened in the museum, in the main museum space there. And the sense from them, it was really interesting, because that was actually the first project that group had done, so they'd not done the normal devising process. But there were many issues around PTSD, and what they were able to do in terms of performance, in terms of actually being in a space with other people, confidence levels, issues around memory, not being able to remember lines, many kind of... I'm loath to think of them as limitations, because actually they ended up being kind of the reasons that we found many creative solutions and more interest in theatre, actually. But that needed taking on board outside of the workshop room, I think. And so that their work, their experiences, their stories, I used a lot of verbatim theatre in there, were contextualised within that wider political frame. The response from them was tremendous, actually. Very strong sense of ownership. Can't believe you managed to say everything we wanted to say. All of that kind of very positive feedback. And then for audience as well, we had very positive feedback. We had quite a lot of stakeholders from Veterans Services coming, and very, very pleased to see something like that happening, spoken so powerfully, all of that kind of thing. In terms of reaching policymakers, decision makers and so on, we still struggle. We try and situate the work in places that are accessible. We invite everybody that we should be inviting, but we maybe get, one local councillor at a time. That's still something that we're struggling with. We're working. Okay. In fact, we found it very hard to develop partnerships with mainstream arts organisations. We found it very easy to develop relationships with community groups, voluntary groups, museums. We've got a big partnership project with National Museums Merseyside for their dementia work. So non-arts organisations, we found that there is a much stronger ethical connection, and a connection in terms of values and ethos and approach, than other arts organisations who we might not... I can't be doing with bloody parachute projects, and I can't be doing with participation programmes that are just about getting people involved and ticking boxes and having a bit of a laugh and then moving on after a couple of months. And we couldn't, in all conscience, kind of partner with that kind of work. Third Age Theatre and the Homeless Company, the model that they use is that the funding we secure is usually for 3-year projects. So we know we've got 3 years of a core group that will meet every week. We can then do outreach work, weaving around that, reaching into the most kind of disaffected pockets, I suppose. Offer them started off by just doing kind of 1-off or 2-off or 3-off sessions with groups and trying to involve them to come back into the core group then to make that offer. And that did work for some people, but not for everybody. So then we extended that outreach offer, and what we tend to do now is between 6 and 8 week, sometimes 10 week outreach projects with a group, which will be accredited. So it will be a body of work in its own right. So it's accredited either through the Arts Award or through the Open College Network. And at the end of that, encourage people to join the core group. So they will have been aware the whole time that there is core provision, they can join, but by that time they've kind of built their confidence and they've developed their skills to a point at which they're more likely to be able to commit to something that's more ongoing. So that's the model that we've chosen to use. The only place that's failed for us really lately was with the third age provision, where we just couldn't secure the funding to continue it. Now, we'd run it from, 2007 up until 2013 or 14 consistently, and then we just couldn't get the money anymore. So what we did with that was make sure that, you know, any theatre visits we had, any shows that we did, any events we organised, that we invited all of those participants to. We kind of kept them abreast of progress. And so now the group's starting up again, and we've got our core members back, and we've done a lot of outreach to get new people in as well. So that's the model that we go for.
Okay.
I think the shortest term project we've ever embarked on was 12 months.
Okay.
We're a national portfolio organisation. We got made an RFO in 2008, so we've not been going very long. We'd had significant project grants from the Arts Council prior to that, and then in 2008 they made us an RFO. So we've been successful to continue that funding since then, and we get about between 1/3 and 1/4 of our turnover comes from the Arts Council.
Okay.
Beyond that, then the work is funded through mostly through 3-year project grants. So each of the core strands of activity would have one main funder. So Children in Need have funded the youth for quite a long time. Big Lottery, Reaching Communities, funds the homeless work. So that's how a lot of it comes in.
Yeah.
And then we apply for smaller pots, £5,000 here, £6,000 there, to be able to enhance production budgets essentially. So for instance, with the youth theatre, the Children in Need funding, the Arts Council funding supports most of our core costs.
Okay.
Liverpool City Council gives about £8 or £9 a year. That goes towards supporting the core costs of our creative producer Mandy, who manages the participatory programme. And then the Reaching Communities money funds the arts workers, the venue hire, the kind of main programme costs for transitions, the homeless work. But then we try and get little £5,000 or whatever pots on top of that for production budgets and so on, to be able to up the quality and boost it a bit.
Yeah.
So that's largely how it works.
Okay.
We then get some commissioned work, but we've made a decision very early on that we'd only go for commissioned work if it really sat within our values and if it was work that we wanted to be making. We've never done the kind of funding chasing, oh, there's a pot here, let's go for it. We've never done that. So the work in St Helens has all been commissioned by the arts team and the mental health services team, and now by Heart of Glass. So they, between them, have kind of found the money to bring us in to work with mental health service users, and now that remit has extended a little bit more widely to adults, vulnerable adults. We've also taken a commission from the museum to do their House of Memories Dementia project. So they've had this long-term project. They brought us in to write and produce a day-long activity which kind of weaves a drama through the entire day and involves activities for the delegates. They're all carers come into that. So that it's funded by the commission, and then there's a wee bit of that comes back into us as management fee that we can then use as unallocated money to, you know, top up whatever needs it really, because most of the money is ring-fenced for very specific bits of project.
Yeah.
So we're lucky that we have Annette Burgess, who's our exec director. She and I are the kind of senior management team, and Annette would manage money and finance and policy and all of that kind of stuff. So she does most of that these days. Her and I fundraise together. I tend to write the copy and the narrative and the grand ideas, and she makes it work. So that's how that all works. We have an office space. We moved, I think last year, but I do lose track of time. We're now in the MPAC building in Liverpool, which is Merseyside Play Action Council. It's a lovely space with lots of office spaces and some kind of adequate workshop space. So we have one large office, which is a team office, with a little meeting room, and then we have a workshop space next door to that we use for our core group meetings. Where the outreach work we actually do out in situ, so we go to the groups where they're at, and then performance work mostly happens in homeless shelters, community centres, different settings out in the community. So that's how that works. We have a small kind of resource stock that we've built up over the, we've got a smoke machine, we've got a couple of lanterns, very small PA system, very small stock of stuff like that. And we've got a really, really strong team of people. So there's myself and Annette, who I'm artistic director, she's exec director. And then there's Mandy Redversrow, who is our director of, I don't know what her job title is, it changed lately. She leads the participatory programme, so she manages all of that outreach work. We've then got somebody who's youth theatre director, somebody who's the transitions director, which is look at the homeless community, and Mandy herself leads on the third age work. And then we have freelance artists in to deliver the work in St Helens and various other places, the other bits and pieces that we do. We've got an administrative team. We've got Anna, who's general manager, and Fiona, who does some marketing and social media work for us. Everybody's fractional, so myself and Annette are both 3 days a week, which we usually split over 4 short days to accommodate school pickups and drop-offs. And Annette and I both work remotely. And then the rest of the team are all based in Liverpool. We don't open the office on a day, so the maximum anybody does is a 4-day week for us. I think Fiona's on a 2-day week, so everybody's slightly varied in contract. But we don't charge for workshops, we don't charge for performances, we don't have any earned income. It's hard to raise for everything, it's time consuming, it's exhausting, but we can raise for the participatory programme. There is still a recognition with those trusts and foundations and those big grants schemes that the people we want to work with need input, need money going into those communities, and there's a recognition of the value of the work that we do. I think I've been really proud that we have maintained funding for 10 years now. But the biggest concern for me is what happens with Arts Council and what happens with government funding. We have an ethical fundraising policy, and what that's given us is the kind of weight of being able to say, well, actually, our policy says that this has been ratified by our board. These are our core values. This is where we will and where we won't take money. I mean, there are still ethics around all of the money that we bring. And challenges. Because, for instance, with lottery, with children in need, the focus is all on a kind of liberal change agenda. It's all on empowering people to be able to develop their skills and go off and get work. It's not, none of that is about recognising the systemic problems that are facing people or the radical changes that need to happen. So we kind of sneak that in by the back door a bit. I suppose we absolutely recognise and value those personal benefits and totally believe in them. So that's why we're okay with taking that funding. But we always feel that there's more to do, that we can't, nobody wants to give you the money to do that bit, And I think it was Jan Cohen Cruz that talked about the difference between liberal and radical change, and about how a liberal arts facilitator is all about that kind of personal change, empowerment, trying to help the individual to make their situation better, but how the radical arts practitioner is about helping the individual to understand their place in the wider social and political context and look at those bigger systemic changes that are required. And for me, the liberal change stuff is what happens in the workshop room.
Okay.
It's what happens through the drama process of somebody meeting regularly with a group, having a regular something to go to that is often giving them meaning, giving them structure to their lives, a reason to get up in the morning, where they are developing skills, teamwork, communication, confidence, all of those skills. That happens through that drama process, through that weekly core provision, or through the outreach works that we're doing. Excuse me. The radical change then for me is kind of coming in the process of politicisation that's happening through that. So our facilitators are introducing ideas, not party political ever, but introducing ideas and questions that start to get people thinking beyond themselves. So first of all, it's about moving from thinking just about you to thinking about the group, to then thinking about that wider political context. So all of the artists that we work with now are very clued in and are kind of prepped, and they do their reading around the subject matter. They know what the current issues are, what the policy debates are. They know all of that stuff, and that comes into the workshop room at the point at which the group is ready to engage with that and encounter that. So I suppose it's educational in a kind of Freerian kind of way. The whole point is about empowerment, really. But then when you come to the piece of theatre and how you make it the theatre, that's when the radical agenda kind of comes in more, and that's, as I said, that's able to happen more since I've been writing the work, because it's much easier to kind of sit back from it and take, well, these are their personal stories, this is the political frame, how can we mesh that together? So the Imperial War Museum was a good example of that, I think, where it was very much centred around personal testimonies and experiences, but we found theatrical ways of looking at the bigger picture of, how the government is tackling, how the NHS is tackling PTSD, how people are just left high and dry, how the community covenants are not being implemented. All of that kind of wider political narrative came into the piece of theatre. So the participants would have been completely aware of that through the workshop process, but we were able to frame a piece of theatre that brought those two things together and juxtaposed them, I think. So what that does for us is give a focus to the work. It enables us to say, right, this piece is trying to contribute to change in this particular way, and that kind of tries to tie us into that multitude of opposition, into the kind of global movement for social justice. So that's how we're kind of situating ourselves, I suppose, and framing the work that we're doing. And all of that is in that frame of poverty and inequality, really. It's all about saying this is really shit and it needs to change. The only other thing that's worth kind of bringing up, I think, around poor theatre is the dilemma that it costs. So, there's stuff that we can do that's not, we can be inventive, we can be creative and theatrical, and we can do stuff on no budget. This wealth in health piece, the wealth is health piece I'm writing at the minute, we have no production budget for it, actually. So we're relying on the resources that we've already got in-house, the invention and the creativity of the people involved, the ability of the one stage manager we can afford for the week to make some props. We're having to do that. But even on a no-budget production, we still need to pay people salaries and wages. And I was at a conference a few years ago where the lovely Raymond Muldoon from CAST was talking about just get out there and do it, just make it like we did in the 70s. Just, you don't have to, it doesn't matter if you don't get paid for it, just do it. But I feel we have a responsibility to artists to pay them properly. And, people, this pays my rent, this is my job, it's what I do, I'm skilled, I want paying for my job. We as an organisation, it's not the same as being a radical performance activist who can just go off on their own bat and decide they're going to make work. We've a responsibility to get funding in, to pay people's salaries, to make sure that people are getting paid fairly. So we can very rarely afford to pay more than equity minimum, say, or more than the kind of baseline, what's acceptable. We've signed up to the Fair Wage campaign. I think we were the first or second arts organisation to sign up to that nationally. So we try to make sure we pay people properly. But that gets undercut then by other projects that don't believe in the same principles, so they pay students to do stuff on the cheap, or they get volunteers or whatever. And I think that's a real issue for poor theatre, if you like, these days. Matty, our youth theatre director, has spent quite a lot of time in South America. And he came back 6 months ago from a recent trip, Winston Churchill funded one, and wrote a report on it. And an awful lot of the work they're doing, they do use volunteers. They're working in a very, very different context. But I feel for us working in England with an arts council, with funding in place, that we've a responsibility to pay people properly. And I think that's the discussion that should happen across the sector as well. You know, it's all very well making poor theatre, but you've a responsibility as an arts organisation. Who else is going to pay artists? Who else, you know, where else are they going to get a living from? So unless you're going to go back to the 30s where everybody was doing it because they believed in it but they didn't have any money, that's all wrong as well, I think. So I don't know, that's just another one to throw into the mix there.